Deputy Prime Minister Musalia Mudavadi's hopes of being the compromise candidate in the Jubilee coalition appears dashed as the crisis in the coalition deepens.
Musalia has revealed that Deputy Prime Minister Uhuru Kenyatta signed a pact to shelve his presidential ambitions in favor of him.
But as KTN Samogina reports, Uhuru says he signed the deal with Musalia under pressure and has since changed his mind.
Played out on a day the coalition was to hold its presidential nomination contest. The main cast, Deputy Prime Ministers Uhuru Kenyatta and Musalia Mudavadi, trying to sanitize the antagony that has crippled the alliance since its formation 2 weeks ago. Mudavadi at his presidential secretariat revealed Uhuru signed a deal relinquishing his presidency to him. But Uhuru at a delegates meeting claimed he was coerced into shelving his ambition to back Mudavadi's bid.
That after consultation, he had decided to withdraw his candidature and wished to support me as the coalition candidate for president.
Shetani ambaye hata hajui kazi hiyo tulianzisha namna gani. Wanakuja wanasema sasa unajua sasa nyinyi mkienda hivyo mmejitangaza. Unajua sasa wazungu hawatatupatia pesa.
Revisiting the chronology of events on December 4th that led to the signing of the coalition pact, Mudavadi says it is Uhuru and Ruto who visited his residence with the deal proposal. They would later retreat to Uhuru's residence where they signed an agreement in the presence of Ruto and their lawyers. Mudavadi attributes the grandstanding on the picking of the coalition's presidential nominee to TNA party headliners and not Uhuru Kenyatta, something which Uhuru appeared to confirm at the delegates meeting Tuesday.
We would like to urge hardliners in our midst who wish to pursue extremely personal interests to allow the party leaders to discuss and provide the way forward.
Mimi hamu yangu haikuwa ati kiti ambacho nitakalia. Hamu yangu ni yule uongozi ambao tutakuwa nao na amani ambayo tutakuwa nayo katika taifa letu la Kenya.
Despite being bashed by TNA MPs of wanting the presidency on a silver platter, Mudavadi says he's not afraid of a contest, but such a battle will be a breach of the coalition deal with Uhuru.
Mimi nitaogopa vipi kwenda kwa debe na dijitayarisha kwenda kwa debe kubwa?
This is the team that is going to form the next government. And we are sure the group on the other side will form the opposition.
But Mudavadi downplayed the nomination crisis, saying they are surmountable. This as TNA delegates endorsed the former Uhuru-Ruto deal, where Uhuru is the presidential candidate and Ruto as his running mate.
We will make every effort to nurture our young coalition through the turbulent gales of mistrust and factional intrigue.
Je, ni nani ameona hiyo karatasi? Ati nyinyi mmekubali Uhuru amwachie Musalia Mudavadi?
Meanwhile, given Mudavadi's faltering, some TNA MPs are now toying with the idea of replacing Mudavadi with NARC presidential hopeful Charity Ngilu. Ngilu is expected to equally toss herself in the contest for the Jubilee coalition presidential race. The crisis resulted to shelving of the delegates meeting and the parties writing to the Register of Political Parties seeking extension of picking its presidential candidate to December 24th. In essence, Mudavadi has confirmed the deep-seated suspicion and mistrust existing in the Jubilee coalition, the underlying factor being political conmanship, where Mudavadi claims Uhuru has backtracked from the deal they both signed, this putting the already fragile marriage on the rocks. Samogina, KTN, Nairobi.
Well, there you have it. And that story brings us to our big question tonight. And we are asking you, do you think Mudavadi was shortchanged? Do you think Mudavadi was shortchanged?
Let us know what you think on that alliance. Send us your brief comments beginning with the yes or no to our SMS number 8040. We will sample your comments at the end of this live newscast.
Let's go on with the news. With Musalia Mudavadi's association with Jubilee Alliance on the rocks, question is, why did the Sabatia legislator choose not to participate in the delegates' conference at Kasarani? And why did Uhuru's side prefer the delegates to pick the flag bearer even without bona fide delegates in place?
Mudavadi has twice been endorsed in Kasarani, and his refusal to participate this time round in the exercise is what our senior reporter Aaron Ochieng sought to find out.
The uncertainty in the Jubilee coalition over who should be the presidential candidate, coupled with the decision to call off a planned joint delegates conference at the Kasarani Gymnasium, brings to picture the reality that many politicians undergo in the hands of the so-called party delegates. According to reports, Deputy Prime Minister Musalia Mudavadi opposed the delegates conference, fearing that the meeting was orchestrated to endorse Uhuru Kenyatta, and that the legitimacy of the delegates who would participate in the exercise is in doubt. Mudavadi knows this too well, having benefited from endorsements by delegates twice in his political career. He was in the mix in 2002 when KANU endorsed him as one of the 4 vice chairmen that also included Uhuru Kenyatta, Katana Ngala and Kalonzo Musyoka.
On behalf of the KANU delegates,
the events of that year saw humiliation of former KANU strongmen George Saitoti, Joseph Kamodho and Joe Nyaga in the hands of delegates.
I shall not offer myself for any for any position. I can see many of my supporters are unhappy, but you will prove me right in the future.
Nimeomba Mungu, nimekaa chini, nimeonelea kwamba nitaachilia hiyo kiti na musapoti mzee.
The next time Mudavadi was benefiting in the endorsement of delegates was 5 years later at the same grounds. This time he was in orange colors, and he was unanimously endorsed to be Raila Odinga's running mate in the 2007 general election. Kasarani is now a familiar venue for Mudavadi, and his refusal to enter the shouting match that takes place there must be well informed. His party UDF is an infant and has never conducted any national or grassroots elections. It therefore means that the party has no delegates, or rather genuine ones, and for him to enter the shouting match would be a disadvantage, and he may come out wounded in the hands of Uhuru Kenyatta. His ability to mobilize delegates to compete with Uhuru's TNA, a more established and wealthier party than UDF, may be a risk that Mudavadi does not want to take. What if he enters and loses? There is no fallback plan, as number 2 slot in the Jubilee arrangement is under lock and key, specially reserved for William Ruto. It is a dilemma that faces Mudavadi, with his Western Kenya patronage watching closely.
Na sisi tumesema Musalia akipata, sisi wote tutaenda nyuma yake.
He has twice benefited from party endorsement by delegates, in 2002 and in 2007. But this time around, Deputy Prime Minister Musalia Mudavadi is cautious on entering into a similar arrangement, with the game not looking so good in his favor. Aaron Ochieng, KTN, Nairobi.
All right, typical of Kenyan tradition, eligible voters rushed to get registered on the last day of voter registration period. At district offices, long queues were the order of the day as Kenyans without identification cards came to collect their documents in order to make it to the various registration centers and be counted.
Well, however, in Kwale County, it was not a case of Kenyan tradition, but human error, where one registration clerk forgot the password of the biometric voter registration system. Catherine Omwanto reports.
Barak Kundruya is one stressed out man. On the last day of registration, he happened to forget the password to his biometric voter registration machine.
Unfortunately, kila nikifungua inaniambia hizo hizo encryptions, password. Nimejaribu kuandika hizo password, nikaweka password na nipatia some minutes.
Sasa nina wasiwasi kwa sababu nilikuwa nina hamu nipate hiyo card ili nijue ninaweza nikapiga nikapigia mtu wangu nani na nani na nani.
After waiting for hours for the mechanical mishap to be addressed, residents of Mavirini and Mwasanga eventually gave up and went their separate ways. In Nyeri, the last day of voter registration saw an unexpected act of kindness from loan sharks. The Shylocks, realizing the political importance of this exercise, returned over 400 identification cards belonging to their debtors.
Wafanyabiashara wale wanaitwa kwa kimombo Shylocks, wakienda wanakopa shilingi 500, 1000, alafu wanaweka vitambulisho kama security.
In Nairobi, the major issue was the lack of identification cards.
At the District Commissioner's office in Starehe, we have tens of people coming into the office so that they can pick up their ID cards. Now, the reason here being is that they can probably go to the various registration centers around them or that are most convenient to them so that they can register as voters before the deadline elapses. The main reason for the last-minute rush was
last minute,
or the occasional admission of lack of interest.
I wasn't decided to vote, so I just decided today to vote.
In Kisumu, it was almost the same case. Those who arrived at registration centers say they were too busy, but this woman's husband was not taking any excuses.
Sasa nilikuwa kwa nyumba, nilikuwa nimechoka, lakini mzee kanikaza kaniambia leo sitalala kwa nyumba bila kwenda kuchukua kura. Sasa ndio nikaona hata sasa ameshinda na nipigia simu, uko wapi uko wapi, nikamwambia nimefika.
IEBC clerks have been directed to ignore the 6 p.m. deadline and register the last eligible voter, even if the process takes them through the night. Catherine Omwando, KTN.
Thanks, Catherine. That woman should be an example. 13 million people have been registered. Have you been registered? That's what we are asking tonight.
That's the all-important question, of course, on the backdrop of the information that there had been a lot of voter apathy. But KTN's Asha Mwilu has been pitching camp in Lokichar in the county of Turkana just to keep pace with the voters there and try to find out if indeed they get registered as voters. Asha.
Yes, Linda, good evening to you. As you know, we have been in Turkana County for the past 5 days, and we've been observing what's happening here in terms of the ongoing registration process, just to see how the residents here have been faring. And so far, we realized that most of the registration centers remained idle for the better part of the registration process. Now, today being the last day, we began with Lodwar Town, being the business center of Turkana County, and wanted to see if Kenyans in Lodwar were actually going to the registration centers, as we saw in Nairobi and other parts of the country, to make long queues to have the last rush of registering. But there were just a handful of people in some of the registration centers that we visited. So what we did next is that we went into the villages, went towards Lokichar, and we talked to some IEBC officials. There was heavy downpour in some of these regions, actually most of these regions, up until Lokichar from Lodwar. And so this hampered the registration process in most of the IEBC centers. And what happened is that the IEBC officials had to call in the village elders to send them out into the villages and try to tell people that today is the last day, it's the final day, there'll be no extension, so come out in numbers to register. When we got to Lokichar, the situation was actually the same. What we realized is that the voters in Lokichar, not many of them came out, and what we were told by the IEBC officials is that probably the reason behind this is that this is a really vast region and very few people live in these centers that I'm talking about, such as Lokichar, Lodwar, the main towns. And so it's a long walking distance for some of these voters, and they couldn't brave the rains during the day to come and get registered. And so probably this is one of the explanations that the IEBC officials gave us for the declining numbers in terms of Turkana County, as opposed to other counties that, of course, have had even over 80% of voter registration. And so, of course, the Quote My Vote segment was not just about a voter registration for KTN. It was about bringing out the voices of the people all across the country, especially in counties like Turkana, which are really inaccessible due to the poor infrastructure and bad roads. And what we realized is that apart from the voter registration, Kenyans in such regions are really enthusiastic about the next election. They're really hopeful about the county governments that they're going to vote in, and will, of course, be keeping tabs up until and after the March 13 election to find out what Kenyans from such regions are talking about. Well, from the KTN crew and myself, Asha Mwilu, my colleague Saida Swale, and the entire production crew in Turkana County, thank you very much for being with us the past 5 days, following up on the registration process, and good night. It's a wrap. Linda.
KTN's Asha Mwilu all the way from the county of Turkana. They're giving us an overview of what happened in that county on the last day of the voter registration exercise. She says long walking distance and of course the rainy season that has now kicked in kept off a lot of the people from being registered as voters. Says the number did not really change that much.
Well, the question is low voter turnout and also all these things that are hampering the IEBC to register you as a voter. The most important thing is that, have you registered as a voter? And Sophia Wanuna is also standing by. She has an update for us. Sophia?
Choosing.
Sophia?
Thank you very much, Linda and Eric. Indeed, voter registration exercise closing today. I'm now joined in Studio B by COIBC James Oswago to talk more about how the exercise has run for the last 30 days. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time. I begin by asking, are you satisfied with how the voter registration exercise has run in the past 30 days?
By and large, yes.
Okay. Just yes. What are some of the challenges you have faced? What are some of the challenges you'd highlight you have faced?
I say by and large, yes, because the Commission has done everything else that it was expected to do in preparation for this exercise and in running it. There were earlier challenges, there were earlier teething problems in the first 2 days or so, but we overcame those logistical challenges. And everything was in place for the larger part of the period that the voter registration was continuing. And yet, the turnout was not as good as we thought it would be. Let me give you an example. We had 15,000 kids. Our calculation had been that if you had a minimum of 50 Kenyans registering per kid per day, then that would tally to 750,000 registrants per day. And if you extended that for 30 days, then you'd have 22.5 million Kenyans registering within the 30 days.
All right.
What happened was that the kids were underutilized, the clerks were idle most of the time, and we were disappointed. This is the part that we couldn't project clearly. We thought that the turnout would be a minimum of about 50 people turning up a day.
All right, you say that, but the truth is the BVR kits were way less than the voter registration centers. So for most people, really it was an issue of access, being unable to access the BVR kits because they fell way less than the number of centers you had. So for some people, really huge, long distances apart. So in that regard, do you feel you failed Kenyans in that part to avail them closer to them?
No, I don't think so. We had this exercise was being done in several registration centers.
Right.
And in all those centers, we had either a kit dedicated to that particular station or a kit within the ward that could register you anywhere within that particular place. But I'm yet to find a place in the world where voter registration instruments or equipment is found all over the whole place. People have to move to where registration is done. I think we came up with a novel experiment of trying to move around, in an attempt to reach the people where they were. This is as a result of the lessons we learned during the referendum and during our previous history, that Kenyans would want, you have to go where they are.
All right. As we were conducting the exercise time and again, the IEBC had said that the rallying of Kenyans to come out to register is not a preserve of the IEBC and that all stakeholders must be involved, the government, Kenyans themselves, those seeking public office. Do you feel you have received enough goodwill from all these stakeholders?
Yes, there was enough goodwill. His Excellency the President spoke, all major political party leaders have spoken, religious leaders have spoken. All professionals have spoken. You people in the media have been wonderful for the larger part of the 30 days. All people across the whole spectrum of our society, all cadres of leadership have spoken and urged people to go and register. So we are satisfied that the support that we've got from the leadership in this country has been commendable, because they've spoken a common language, a language exhorting people, asking people, pleading with Kenyans to come out and vote, sometimes using stronger language than necessary, but with the aim of having people getting excited to come and vote.
All right, very quickly, the Executive Director, Institute of Education and Democracy, earlier today speaking to Edith Kimani in our news desk show, said that the government was spending about 860 million shillings per day on the voter registration. Is that correct? And if so, would you quickly break down for us how exactly that money was being spent per day?
Well, we have, take for example, we have 30,000 clerks, and we are paying those clerks about 1.2 billion shillings just for the duration that they work for us. Apart from that, there are other expenditures to do with voter education, which you have to do, and the government doesn't pay much about voter education. A lot of the budget for voter education is shouldered by donors.
But that is close to 1 billion per day. Are you saying that is all it was being used to do every single day? Close to 1 billion. That's 30 billion.
No. It is not that. It can't be 30 billion, because the entire budget for the voter registration is about, if I put it extravagantly, is in the region of about 2 billion, something like that, 2 to 3 billion. It can't be 30 billion.
If it was 860 million per day, that's 1 billion per day. Are you saying that's not the correct figures that was being spent on the voter registration per day?
No. It certainly, that's not correct.
That is not correct.
Certainly, that's not correct.
Final question before we hand over back to studio. Many Kenyans wondering why the requirement to ensure that you register where you're going to vote come the 4th of March general election, saying that this is an electronic system. Why? Because then initially it was the black books. So this really information, one would assume, should be able to access by a click of a button anywhere around the world, since it's all electronic. Why that requirement?
You can configure that kit technologically so that a Kenyan in Nairobi, you can register in Nairobi and vote in Nyeri or vote wherever. You can do that. Technologically, you can do that. But remember, this is a very complex election. You have to recall that we are coming from a background of post-violent background, and there is, even the prognosis for this election is not very good. There are people who still say that it may not be as peaceful as you want to.
Right.
So the commission had to consider many factors.
But could it have been possible, before quickly we wind up this first segment, could it have been possible for one to register in Nyeri and vote in Mombasa because it's all electronic? Could it have been possible?
Of course.
You're just being careful because of the factors you're raising?
Of course, it could be possible.
All
you
right.
can do that.
Okay.
But doing that comes with
a cost.
The key thing in building a register is verification. The key thing, the integrity of the register comes from verification.
Okay.
If you are registered here today and you're going to vote in Malindi, can we be sure that we have put you in the correct register in Malindi at the particular time that you're going to vote?
All right, thank you very much. We are pressed for time, but this conversation continues shortly, and I hand you back to Studio A. Linda and Eric will be back with more questions for the IEBC CEO. Stay with us.
There you go, KTN Sophia Nuna speaking to James Oswago, the CEO of IEBC, asking all the questions that you may have had. And of course, she's not done yet. She'll be back in just a few minutes.
Well, as the voter registration exercise came to an end today, the next headache for the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is the preparation of the registrar for inspection.
But as the Commission works out modalities for this, KTN has learned that some discrepancies are emerging, with some voters' ID numbers having been used against other names to register in different locations. Willis Angira reports.
As majority of eligible voters grappled with the last-minute dash to enlist themselves as voters, one of the aspirants in Kiambu County is fighting to ensure that her registration as a voter will indeed count come March 2013.
Yeah,
Terry Kairu had lived abroad for the last 18 years and came back home to build the nation under the new constitution. In the March 2013 elections, she is gunning for the Kiambu senator's seat. All was well until she went to register as a voter and got the shock of her life.
Right now, I'm not sure what is happening. The IBC should come clean and tell us what is happening. If I am a candidate and my information was fed in the BVR machine, who did that? The computers don't feed themselves.
Efforts to have the anomaly rectified seem to have hit a dead end. Despite being registered as a voter and holding a voter's card, checks on the IEBC database using her ID number still brings up details of one Joyce Chepkemboi, a voter registered in Uasin Gishu County.
I think somebody is doing something funny. That is how elections start. They start rigging the elections when things like that happen.
Terry Kairu is one of many Kenyans who will wake up to this nightmare when the voter register comes up for inspection. For now, she says her only option is to take her case to the corridors of justice. Willis Angira, KTN Prime.
In the same breath, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has registered close to 13 million voters.
A closer look at those figures shows clear patterns of apathy and participation. KTN's Edith Kimani breaks down the numbers and brings us the following report.
Right from the beginning of the registration process, Lamu, Kiambu, Nairobi, Murang'a and Nyeri topped the list of counties with the highest number of registered voters. It is no wonder then that by Sunday, the number of listed voters in these regions had exceeded the 70% mark. However, while they did not feature in the top 5, Siaya and Vihiga counties also registered huge populations. What is the secret? With the exception of Lamu, all these regions are fielding presidential aspirants.
Our attitude towards politics still remains, and that attitude is that unless one of our own is at the highest office in the land, then we will be excluded from, partaking of the national cake.
Counties like Mandera, Wajir and Garissa are on the other extreme of this scale. These counties are reporting registration percentages in the lower 20s. According to Salingo, marginalization of these counties leads directly to apathy.
Their argument has always been that they are excluded from processes, and that is actually what determines their attitude towards electioneering as well, that they tend to see themselves as outsiders and therefore excluded from these.
Voter apathy has also been linked to fear. Counties that experienced violence in the last election are not seeing many eligible Kenyans registering to vote this time around.
The experience in the last elections is still fresh in a lot of the minds of Kenyans, and many of them suffered, and therefore they still have that culture of shying away from the political electioneering process.
While the registration patterns can be interpreted differently, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission can take pride in the fact that it has managed to register over 70% of the country's electorate. Edith Kimani, KTN, Nairobi.
Thank you, Edith. Let's now continue with the debate, and James Oswago is on the other side of this studio with our Sophia Wanuna. Sophia?
All right, thank you, Eric. Linda, we continue the interview with CEO IEBC, James Oswago. You watched that report by our Willis Angira, and a registered voter now, that lady Terry. Her ID number brings up details of a different person registered in Uasin Gishu. What do you have to say about that? Have you heard about this case? Are there more such cases?
There could be more such cases. I'm very much aware of this case. She wrote to the commission. We cross-checked her claims with the National Registration Bureau, and we found there is merits in her claim. For now, she's registered as a voter, and there was a confusion between her registration and the other voter. This is a case we are aware of. I've written to her, And for now, she's a voter. And
what do you intend to do about it and other cases that might be like hers around the country?
What we did with her case is what we'll do with all the other cases. There is a process called deduplication, where once people are registered, you match what the record you have against all the others. And you pick up cases where there are errors or cases where there's likelihood or there's suspicion. In her case, she reported it to ourselves. We checked it, and we found that indeed, like I've told you, there's merit in what she's saying. And we are correcting that in the sense that it is not our fault. This is a registration problem with the Kenya National Bureau, and they have alerted us, and we have communicated to her.
All right, ODM called for extension of the registration period, as so have so many Kenyans. But Chairperson Anyang' Nyong'o was saying that there was breakdown of BVR kits of more than long periods of up to 2 weeks. So saying that that is basis enough to allow for Kenyans to be able to have more time to register. Tie that with the fact that there were not enough, there were not enough BVRs, centers for the registration exercise, as we'd mentioned earlier. Do you feel all Kenyans have been given equal opportunity, equal chance to be able to participate in this process?
It is true that for the first 2 days or so, there were challenges with machines. That is true. We have to acknowledge that. That was redressed very quickly. It is also true that the reason, and this is the honest reason, it is also true that the reason for the low turnout has nothing to do with either malfunctioning kits or unavailability of those kits. They were available, they were underutilized. But supposing you wanted to extend this, the thing that we have to understand is there are certain things must be done downstream. The election date will not change. Once we finish with this process, we start building up a preliminary register, which starts from 20th to 30th. Once that is over, you have to subject that to public inspection of that particular register. Then there are also other activities that will follow. For instance, you want independent candidates to submit their signals.
So no chance of an extension period? Tomorrow we wake up and we hear IBC
for me, it is not for me to say so. It is for the Commission to make a decision after our consultation.
Is it likely?
I'll tell you this. If the number that we have registered is nearer to the target that we set, in all likelihood, there would be no need for an extension.
All right. Final question before I let you go. Quite a number of Kenyans will be disenfranchised, not able to participate in the next election, most of them having waiting cards, some in situations that are beyond their control. Do you feel that the Ministry of State, Immigration and Registration of Persons has failed the IEBC in regard to this?
Let me put it this way. The Commission said to register 18 million Kenyans. For them to be registered, they must have ID cards. Those who did not register because they didn't have ID cards and are therefore disenfranchised have been done an injustice. The cause for that injustice lies not with the IBC.
All right. Thank you very much, Chairman. We appreciate your time coming in to talk to us. So with your answer, then there might be deliberations and there might be an extension of the exercise. Possible?
I won't.
You won't close the door?
I won't bet on that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We have been talking to IEBC CEO James Oswago. The closing of the voter registration today, and of course we'll soon be hearing the exact figures, how many Kenyans have registered as voters. That's all from us in this side of studio. Back to you, Eric and Linda.
Sophia Wanuna, many thanks. Now let's focus on the big story tonight. Musalia Mudavadi says he signed a deal with Uhuru Kenyatta. Uhuru Kenyatta seems to have changed his mind. That is our big question tonight. We're asking you, do you think Mudavadi was shortchanged? Thanks for staying with us this far. Now, a press conference called by the Labour Board to denounce the nurses' union and their ongoing strike degenerated into a war of words after the unregistered Union Secretary General Seth Panyako get crushed the event.
Panyako's presence at the briefing held at the Ministry of Labour boardroom and settled the Labour board members, turning the press conference into a personal attack. KTN's Anso Imwendia reports on the events that unfolded today as patients continue to bear the brunt of the strike.
You accuse corruption, and you accusing me of being corrupt. What reason can you give in law? What's corruption? To deny corruption is when you deny people their rights.
We have
when you use your office.
We have interpreted the law to the best of our ability. That's what I'm telling you.
National Labour Board Chairman Dr. Ekuro Aukot settling it out to the unregistered nurses Union Secretary General Seth Panyako shortly after a media conference at the Ministry of Labour offices. And this is where it all started. The board, comprising the Federation of Kenya Employers, Central Organization of Trade Unions, and the Labour Commissioner as convener, issued a statement declaring the ongoing nurses strike illegal.
You can only mount the strike if you are legally registered and if you legally lead a trade union. That is what the law says. So we are saying it is illegal for workers to be on strike right now.
While Court Secretary General Francis Atwoli was making his statement, an official of the union on the spot walked in and occupied the seat Atwoli used before moving closer to the microphones. And so when Atwoli moved back to his seat...
Excuse me. Hold on. I want to sit. This is my chair. I'm standing. Yeah, please.
Okay, do you mind? So this is a National Labour Board.
This is a National Labour Board, and you are not a member of National Labour Board. I have a right to be heard. Court is there.
The mood at the press conference changed, and quickly the speakers gave more personal reasons for declining to register the nurses union.
A fellow called Seth Panyako, supposed to be the Secretary General, he had actually been dismissed from Kenyatta National Hospital for misconduct.
You are championing for when you have no job, you are a man of no fixed abode, and then you are making others to suffer for nothing.
Issues Panyako later told the media were not raised in the letter rejecting the formation of the nurses union last month.
Mr. Francis Atwoli came out fighting for me, and he even gave a notice that Kenyatta National Hospital should re-employ me.
The board challenged the unregistered union to lodge an appeal in court. The union, on the other hand, challenged the board to move to court to block the strike. Despite a warning by Medical Services Minister to sack and replace striking nurses, those at the Kenyatta National Hospital announced they will be joining the industrial action on Wednesday. This as Kenyans visiting public hospitals continue to suffer the denial of this essential service. Anso Mwendia, KTN Prime.
In other news today, President Mwai Kibaki and Prime Minister Raila Odinga have endorsed the National Police Service Commission's choice of David Kimayo as Inspector General of Police. The two principals have forwarded the name of Kimayo to Parliament for approval.
Parliament is expected to approve or reject Kimayo's nomination on Thursday this week. Rita Tinina reports on the latest step towards the appointment of the country's top cop.
With a prolonged delay in the appointment of the country's new top cops, the President and Prime Minister finally forwarded the name of the nominee for the position of Police Chief to Parliament for approval, albeit almost a month behind schedule.
That His Excellency the President has, after consultation with the Right Honourable Prime Minister, nominated Mr. David Mwole Kimayo.
David Kimayo, who is currently the director of the Kenyan National Focal Point on Small Arms, was the National Police Service Commission's favourite for the post of Inspector General of Police, having scored the highest rating. He was nominated by the Commission alongside his deputy John Ochieng and Grace Kaindi, the commandant of the Kenya Airports Police Unit.
That the name of this nominee be forwarded to the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security for consideration prior to approval by the House.
In his communication to the House, Speaker Kenneth Marende did not give any direction on the nominees for the two posts of Deputy Inspector General and the Director of CID. The Police Service Commission nominated CID Director Ndegwa Muhoro, Jebet Ndeda of the Railways Police Unit, and Jasper Umbati of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan for the post of Deputy Inspector General in charge of the regular police. AP Commandant Samuel Arachi, Deputy CID Director Gideon Kimilu, and David Ngodi were nominated for the post of Deputy Inspector General in charge of the Administration Police. CID Director Ndegwa Muhoro is also a nominee for the post of Director of the CID. His nomination has been opposed by the Independent Policing Oversight Authority.
With Kimayo's name now before Parliament, he is inching closer to becoming the country's first Inspector General of the Police. But with Parliament set to go on recess on Thursday this week, MPs will be pressed for time to ensure that the country gets a new police chief before the coming elections. Rita Tinina, KTN.
Well, we'll take another break now. Business is up next with Betty Kialo.
And this is what's coming up. Kenya in a second call for investors to set up a fertilizer factory in the country.
Any continued denial of Kenyans of these essential services, in our view, as we say, remains criminal, remains professional misconduct on the part of the nurses, and in our view, we are now calling on the law enforcers to actually investigate the leadership of this purported trade union with a view to ensuring that they follow the law.
Warm welcome to this edition of Prime Business Today. Always a pleasure having your company. My name is Betty Kialo. Now, the government has for the second time called for bids for setting up a fertilizer manufacturing plant in the country. Well, through advertisements in local dailies, the Ministry of Agriculture says interested firms should submit their expression of interests by 16th January 2013.
In the initial press advertisements, the Ministry of Agriculture had indicated that the successful farms would carry out the project from March 2013 and complete it by 2015. Estimated at a cost of 38 billion shillings, the plant will be critical in, among other things, significantly lowering the price of fertilizer in Kenya. A key component in the agricultural sector, fertilizer prices have over the years surged in price, keeping it out of reach of many small-scale farmers. This cadre of farmers, the ministry says, consists of up to 70% of Kenya's food producers. A 2011 feasibility study by the Maxwell Group estimates that the factory will meet the region's demand of 1.26 million tons of fertilizer by 2030 if implemented as planned. Kenya's fertilizer demand is the highest in the region. Its 2010 demand of 446,800 tons is expected to rise to 543,258 tons in the next 8 years, a 21.5% increase. The project bidders are required to demonstrate the ability to undertake the project by giving details of past clients and projects as well as successful past partnerships. They will also have to furnish the government with the plans on how they will finance the project, their proposed ownership stakes, construction timelines, and expectations from the government during the period. Joseph Bonyo, KTN Business Today.
Let's now move on to a developing story. Listed mobile operator Safaricom has filed preliminary legal objections to a case in which it has been sued for stealing the mobile credit scheme popularly known as Mshwari. Now, the firm, through its lawyers, noted that the High Court did not have the jurisdiction to hear such a case. Now, according to its lawyers, Faulu, a microfinance institution, had raised issues of intellectual property. Therefore, the case should be referred to the Industrial Property Tribunal. Faulu had last week moved to court to stop Safaricom and its partner Commercial Bank of Africa from carrying out any transaction on the platform, claiming the two had stolen their idea. Now, the High Court is now expected to give directions on the matter this Thursday. Mshwari, according to data from CBA, has in the last 3 weeks registered over 650,000 subscribers and some 150 million shillings already saved on the platform. Well, moving on, the Kenya Railways Corporation is seeking to grow its alternative business schemes to finance a number of its growth projects. Property development and rental income are among the avenues the corporation is seeking to grow. Well, this is largely due to the relative stagnation of revenues from its core business of passenger and cargo transportation.
Established in 1977, Kenya Railways was created to ease people and cargo transport across the country. But years of bad management ran down the past turtle that is now trying to get back on track. Now a solvent organization, Kenya Railways sees property development as a key alternative source of revenue as income from the rail network remains relatively low. Last year, the past turtle opened up part of its land that lay idle to put up residential houses together with the National Housing Corporation.
We do have a plan to leverage our real estate to be able to provide additional financing for our railway projects because of the finances, the weaknesses in the financing in terms of railway projects. So we have various plans, some of them are already under implementation. The Railway Cities project in Mombasa, Nairobi and Kisumu is under implementation.
Among the huge projects Kenya Railways has lined up include a 1.5 billion shilling Nairobi Urban Transport Project and an 8 billion shilling Nairobi Metropolitan Rail Project. Add to this the billions of shillings required upgrading coaches and the railway lines, the parastatal is looking to boost its income to avoid excess borrowing. With huge investments involved, Kenya Railways is in talks with a number of financiers such as the World Bank and the Government of Kenya to also finance larger projects. Michael Karanja, KTN Business Today.
Kenya Motorsport Federation holds its delayed annual general meeting tomorrow morning, as ordered by the High Court, as it seeks to drive itself back to a smooth road to prosperity after a protracted court battle that saw a section of its directors going to court to seek a legal intervention to stop what it termed as a boardroom coup. By former directors, the court ordered warring parties to settle their differences by involving all parties in an annual general meeting. However, the meeting tomorrow has already hit a legal hitch in terms of notice to convene the meeting, and it's largely expected to sit according to a court ruling, but propose a date for a special general meeting in the coming weeks. Drastic changes are expected in the coming days, according to sources who added that the number of directors may be increased from 7 to 11, as well as ruling on the legitimacy of some affiliate clubs. All the 11 clubs of the federation are expected in the meeting tomorrow that will also initiate the process of electing a new chairman by February next year.